They thought I'd never find out the truth, never connect the dots, never fight back. After 5 long years of enduring a toxic workplace, I finally learned the devastating reality of what was happening behind the charming facade of Redline Dynamics and its star manager. My name is Jenna. I'm 34, and until recently, I was a dedicated project coordinator at what I once believed was my dream company. For 5 years, I poured my heart and soul into my work, consistently exceeding expectations, managing multi-million-dollar client budgets, and never missing a deadline. I was good at my job. I loved my job. What I didn't know was that my success, my professionalism, was being twisted into a target by the very person who was supposed to mentor and support me. The truth I discovered was a sickening pattern of abuse hidden in plain sight, affecting not just me, but many others. Last week, I got the most satisfying phone call of my life, a call that signaled the end of a nightmare and the beginning of justice. If you've ever felt powerless, manipulated, or dismissed in a place where you should have felt safe, then you need to hear this. Comment below if you've ever faced a workplace bully, and subscribe because I'm about to lay it all out. Trust me, if you've ever been made to feel small, if you've ever questioned your own sanity because of someone else's insidious behavior, this story will not only resonate, it will show you that the fight is worth it, and the taste of justice is sweeter than you can imagine. My journey with Redline Dynamics began with such promise. Fresh-faced and ambitious, I was thrilled to land a project coordinator role in bustling Seattle. Redline was a big name in tech solutions, and I was eager to make my mark. And I did. Year after year, my performance reviews glowed. Jenna is a valuable asset, they'd read. Consistently high performer. Manages complex projects with finesse. I was proud of my contributions, proud of navigating the intricate dance of client expectations, team dynamics, and tight deadlines. The man who hired me, Gavin Reed, was the head of our department. In his early 50s, impeccably dressed and armed with a disarming smile, Gavin was the golden boy of Redline. He schmoozed clients with an easy charm that brought in major contracts, and he played golf with the company president every other Saturday. Upper management adored him. He seemed untouchable. I, on the other hand, like many others in the department, felt entirely replaceable. The first year or so was relatively smooth. Gavin was complimentary, but it felt normal. "You look nice today, Jenna. That color really brings out your eyes," he'd say as he passed my desk. I'd smile, say thank you, and get back to my spreadsheets. I was focused on proving myself. I saw in passing little things that pricked at the edge of my awareness. Once I saw Gavin place his hand on a new intern's shoulder in the break room, his touch lingering just a fraction too long. Another time, in a large departmental meeting, he completely dismissed a brilliant idea from a female colleague, only to praise a strikingly similar concept from a male junior staffer minutes later. I cataloged these moments, but at the time, I brushed them off as his special management style, or perhaps unintentional bias. We all make excuses for people in power, don't we? Especially when our livelihoods depend on it. By my 3rd year, the landscape began to shift subtly at first, then with a creeping unease I couldn't ignore. Gavin's comments became less about my work and more about me. He'd find reasons to stand too close when reviewing documents, his arm brushing mine, the scent of his expensive cologne suddenly cloying. He started asking questions about my personal life. "So, Jenna, who's the lucky guy keeping you busy on weekends?" When I got engaged, a wave of genuine happiness washing over my life. Gavin's demeanor towards me cooled significantly. Suddenly, my performance reviews, previously stellar, found new nitpicky criticisms. Deadlines I met were just barely met. Budgets I managed impeccably were too tight. It was baffling and demoralizing. Then my engagement ended a painful period of personal readjustment. Almost immediately, Gavin's attention resurfaced, but this time it was more pointed. Private business lunches were suggested. Just the two of us to discuss your career trajectory. I always found a polite professional reason to decline. I wasn't blind to the power dynamic. He was my boss, the department head, the man who could make or break my career at Redline. I tried to manage it to navigate his behavior without creating waves. I kept my office door open whenever possible. I made sure I wasn't the last one in the office if he was still around. I started taking my lunch breaks at my desk or outside, avoiding the break room roulette of potentially being alone with him. I meticulously documented my work, double-checking everything, ensuring there was no legitimate reason for criticism. My coping mechanism was hyper-professionalism, a shield I hoped would be impenetrable. Some of my colleagues noticed. Patricia, a kind woman from accounting with knowing eyes, would sometimes give me a sympathetic glance after Gavin had made a particularly uncomfortable comment in a group setting. Jake from IT, a quiet guy who often fixed our computer glitches, once subtly positioned himself between me and Gavin during an impromptu hallway conversation where Gavin was standing too close for my comfort. These small gestures of silent support were lifelines, but no one ever spoke up. The culture at Redline was one of fierce competition and a distinct fear of ruffling feathers, especially feathers belonging to someone like Gavin Reed. Around my 4th year, before Gavin became too overt in his harassment towards me directly, I remember feeling a persistent low-level anxiety about the general atmosphere he created. It was around the time he was being particularly cold after my engagement. I tried very cautiously to test the waters with HR. I approached a junior HR representative, someone who seemed approachable, and vaguely mentioned the uncomfortable work environment at times in our department and how some management styles created unnecessary pressure. I didn't name Gavin directly. I was too scared. The response was a blank stare followed by the utterly unhelpful advice to try to be more social with your team, and a suggestion that perhaps I was misinterpreting strong leadership. It was a polite dismissal. That day, a cold dread settled in my stomach. HR wasn't there to protect employees like me. They were there to protect the company and, by extension, its prized assets like Gavin. I realized then with a chilling certainty that I was on my own. The final straw, the one that would shatter my carefully constructed defenses and ignite a fire I didn't know I possessed, was still a year away, lurking just beyond the horizon of my carefully managed days. But the tinder was dry and the air was thick with unspoken tension. Little did I know how explosive the spark would be. The email landed in my inbox on a Monday morning, innocuously titled Q4 Strategy Meeting Las Vegas. Redline was sending a small team to a major industry conference, and I was on the list alongside Gavin and 2 senior executives. My initial reaction was a knot of anxiety. A business trip meant forced proximity, more opportunities for Gavin's unwelcome attention. But it was part of the job. I took a deep breath and opened the itinerary. That's when I saw it. Hotel accommodations Jenna, last name, and Gavin Reed, King Suite Bellagio. My blood ran cold. A shared suite. With Gavin, it was outrageous, unprofessional, and a blatant, undeniable escalation. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, a roaring in my ears. This wasn't a subtle innuendo or a lingering touch. This was a demand, a line so far crossed, it was almost comical in its audacity. I immediately replied, polite but firm. "Thank you for the itinerary. There appears to be a mistake with the hotel booking. I require a separate room. Please amend." An hour later, Gavin appeared in my doorway, that charming smile plastered on his face, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "Jenna, about Vegas." He began, closing the door behind him. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. "It's a budget thing, you know. The company's tightening its belt. Besides," he added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr, "it's a big suite. Plenty of room. We can go over the strategy documents in the evenings, really focus. It'll be productive." My mind raced. 1 month prior, he had cornered me in the break room, blocking my exit while he talked about how much he appreciated my dedication, his gaze lingering on my mouth. It was a small incident in the grand scheme of things, but it had been significant enough, unsettling enough that I had started carrying a small digital audio recorder in my purse, turning it on whenever I anticipated a private meeting with him. My hand instinctively tightened on my bag where the recorder lay dormant. I hadn't turned it on this time. He'd caught me off guard. "Gavin," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I appreciate the thought for the budget, but it's non-negotiable. I require my own room. If that's not possible, then perhaps I shouldn't attend the conference." His smile vanished. "Don't be difficult, Jenna. It's a team-building opportunity." "Don't you want to be a team player?" The veiled threat was unmistakable. "Being a team player doesn't require me to compromise my professional boundaries, Gavin. I need a separate room, or I can contribute to the strategy from here in Seattle." He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. "Fine," he snapped. "Have it your way. But don't expect any special favors when it comes to career advancement." He turned and left, slamming my door just enough to make his displeasure clear. I let out a shaky breath, relief warring with a profound sense of dread. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this wasn't over. The very next morning, I was summoned to HR. Not the junior rep I'd spoken to before, but the head of HR, a stern-faced woman named Linda. Gavin was there, looking aggrieved. Linda informed me in cold corporate speak that due to recent departmental restructuring and performance considerations, my position as project coordinator was being eliminated. Effective immediately, 5 years of dedication, of high performance, of tolerating an increasingly uncomfortable environment, all gone. Just like that. I was stunned, speechless. "Performance consideration," I finally choked out. "My reviews have been excellent until Gavin started—" I trailed off, looking at Gavin, who refused to meet my eyes. "The decision is final, Jenna," Linda said, sliding a severance agreement across the table. "We wish you the best in your future endeavors." I walked out of Redline Dynamics that day in a daze, carrying a small box with my personal belongings, the carefully constructed world of my career shattered around me. I felt humiliated, disposable, and utterly defeated. The Vegas trip, the shared room, it was a test, a final blatant proposition. And because I'd refused, I was punished. This was retaliatory termination, plain and simple. But who would believe me against the golden boy Gavin Reed? The days that followed were a blur of shock, anger, and a crushing sense of injustice. I replayed every interaction with Gavin, every ignored red flag, every moment I'd minimized his behavior. I'd been a frog in slowly boiling water. The severance package was minimal, contingent on signing a non-disclosure agreement that would gag me forever. I didn't sign it. I confided in my ex-boyfriend's sister Lauren, who was a lawyer, albeit in a different field. She listened patiently, her expression growing grimmer with every detail. "Jenna, this is serious," she said. "This sounds like classic quid pro quo harassment and retaliation. You need to file an EEOC complaint, but it's going to be your word against his and against a company that will fight to protect its image." Just as I was about to reach out to Lauren for concrete next steps, I received a certified letter. It was from Redline's high-powered law firm. The letter was chilling. It accused me of unprofessional conduct and failure to integrate with team dynamics. It stated that any attempt to disparage the company or its employees would be met with swift legal action. And then the kicker, it informed me that as per company policy upon termination, my corporate email account, along with any company-related files on my work laptop, had been securely and legally wiped. My stomach dropped. My carefully curated emails, my performance reviews, my project files, potential evidence, gone. They were trying to erase me, to silence me before I could even speak. This was my lowest point. I felt utterly alone, outmaneuvered and defeated. The system was rigged, and Gavin Redline, they held all the cards. Was fighting even an option anymore? The thought of battling a corporate giant with their army of lawyers felt impossible. My EEOC case, I feared, was dead before it even began. A few days later, as I sat staring blankly at my laptop, feeling the suffocating weight of despair, my doorbell rang. It was Patricia from accounting, her usually composed face etched with concern. She held a plain manila envelope. "Jenna, honey, I heard what happened," she said softly, stepping inside. "It's an outrage. I had to come." She sat at my kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a worn spiral notebook. "I've been at Redline for 15 years. she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Gavin. He's been doing this for years. Little things, big things. I started keeping a log about 5 years ago after what happened to another girl." My eyes widened. Another girl. Patricia nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Kelly Morrison, she was a marketing specialist. Bright, ambitious. Gavin did the same to her. The comments, the unwanted attention, the career advice meetings that felt more like dates. She tried to report him informally. They managed her out, called it performance issues. She was devastated. Patricia then pulled out a small flash drive from the envelope. "Kelly left this with me. She said if anyone else ever..." She made me promise. It's her documentation, emails, notes on her interactions with him, copies of her suddenly negative performance reviews after she rebuffed him. She was meticulous. A surge of adrenaline, of something akin to hope, shot through me. I wasn't alone. This wasn't just my isolated experience. This was a pattern. "Patricia," I whispered, Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Don't thank me yet," she said, her gaze firm. "Fight them, Jenna. For yourself, for Kelly, for anyone else he might target. He can't keep getting away with this." Patricia's visit was the turning point. Her courage, her meticulously kept log, and Kelly Morrison's hidden legacy of evidence. It was the lifeline I so desperately needed. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The stakes were higher now, the enemy more formidable than I'd imagined. But for the first time since that devastating termination, I felt a spark of fierce determination. Armed with Patricia's log and Kelly's flash drive, I immediately called Lauren. "You have no idea what just happened," I told her, the words tumbling out. Lauren listened, and I could almost hear her lawyer brain whirring. "This changes things, Jenna," she said, her voice now charged with a new energy. "A pattern of behavior is much harder to dismiss. We need someone who specializes in this. I know just the person." Lauren connected me with Margaret Walsh, a senior partner at a renowned employment law firm in Seattle. Margaret was a force of nature, sharp, empathetic, and utterly unshakable. When I laid out my story presenting Patricia's log and Kelly's drive, Margaret's expression was grimly focused. "This is systematic," she stated, her eyes blazing. "Gavin Reed is a predator, and Redline Dynamics is enabling him." The first step was to track down Kelly Morrison. Using the information Patricia had, we found her. She was now living in Oregon, working for a small nonprofit. When I called her, her voice was hesitant at first, haunted by the past. But as I shared my own story and the evidence Patricia had preserved, I heard the hesitation melt away, replaced by a quiet fury. "He ruined my career at Redline," Kelly said, her voice trembling. "He made me doubt myself for years. Yes, Jenna, whatever you need, I'll help." Her comprehensive documentation was a goldmine emails, where Gavin's tone shifted from professional to inappropriately personal, her own notes timestamping his advances and her rejections, and the stark contrast between her glowing early reviews and the sudden fabricated negative ones that led to her ousting. Margaret's team then began a discreet investigation using LinkedIn and old employee directories to find other women who had worked under Gavin Reed at Redline. It was like pulling at a loose thread that unraveled a hidden tapestry of abuse. One by one, more women came forward, 7 in total besides me and Kelly. Each story was sickeningly similar. The initial charm, the escalating inappropriate comments, the unwelcome, touching, the implicit and sometimes explicit linking of career progression to compliance with his advances, and the swift retaliation or managed exits for those who resisted. Some had left Redline years ago trying to put the experience behind them, but the wounds were still fresh. One of the most crucial breakthroughs came from a woman named Sarah Williams, Gavin's former executive assistant, who had left Redline 2 years prior. Initially, Sarah was terrified. When Margaret's investigator first approached her, she denied knowing anything. "I have a new job now," she'd whispered, her voice tight with fear. "I have a sick mother to care for. I can't get involved." I understood her fear. The threat of retaliation was very real. I asked Margaret if I could speak to her myself. I called Sarah not as a potential litigant, but as someone who understood. I told her about my own experience, about Kelly, about the others. I didn't pressure her, just shared the truth. "We're stronger together, Sarah," I said. "Your voice could be the one that makes the difference." A few days later, Sarah called me back. "I kept a journal," she said, her voice barely audible. "Everything I saw, everything he said to me, to others. Dates, times, what he wore, who else was there. I was so scared he'd find it." She agreed to provide a sworn statement and share excerpts from her journal. It was a damning account corroborating multiple incidents and painting a vivid picture of Gavin's predatory reign. With this mountain of evidence, my own now bolstered by the audio recording of Gavin's Vegas proposition, which I'd realized was on my personal phone's voice memo app, not the work device, Kelly's detailed files, Patricia's 5-year Sarah's journal, and statements from 7 other women, Margaret prepared to amend my EEOC complaint. It was no longer just my word against Gavin's. It was a chorus of voices, a documented history of abuse that Redline Dynamics had ignored, or worse, enabled. Gavin Reed thought he was untouchable. Redline Dynamics thought they could sweep their dirt under the rug. They underestimated me. They underestimated the quiet courage of women like Patricia and Sarah. They underestimated the solidarity of survivors. My breaking point had transformed into a burning resolve. We weren't just fighting for compensation, we were fighting for accountability. We were fighting to ensure Gavin Reed could never do this to anyone else. The real battle was about to begin. The strategy Margaret Walsh devised was bold and multi-pronged. An amended, massively fortified EEOC complaint was filed detailing not just my case, but the clear pattern of harassment and retaliation perpetrated by Gavin Reed, supported by the sworn statements of 9 women in total. But Margaret knew that bureaucratic processes could be slow. To truly force Redline's hand and expose Gavin, we needed to bring the fight into the public square. She had a contact, an investigative reporter at the Seattle Times known for tackling corporate malfeasance. The reporter, a seasoned journalist named David Chu, was initially skeptical, as good reporters often are. But as Margaret laid out the meticulously compiled evidence, the anonymized but detailed accounts, Patricia's log excerpts from Sarah's journal, the chilling similarities in Kelly's and my experiences, and the sheer number of women, his skepticism turned into intense interest. He spent weeks conducting his own discreet interviews, verifying facts and cross-referencing timelines. The day before the article was set to publish, Margaret received a call from Redline's lead counsel, the same lawyer who had sent me the threatening letter. His tone was markedly different now, less arrogant, more concerned. He proposed a confidential settlement for me, a significant one if I dropped the EEOC complaint, and agreed to a lifetime NDA for myself and any associated parties. Margaret's response, which she relayed to me with a grim smile, was polite but firm. "My client is no longer interested in a private settlement that allows Redline to continue to hide Mr. Reed's behavior. We are seeking systemic change and public accountability." The lawyer was reportedly speechless. The old tactics weren't working. Then it happened. The Seattle Times front page story, both in print and online, was explosive. Redline Dynamics, a pattern of harassment. Multiple women accuse senior manager of abuse, company of inaction. The article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, factual damning, and deeply human. It detailed the experiences of several women with their consent, some anonymized, others, like me and Kelly, using our names, the timeline of Gavin's behavior, the company's failure to act, and the retaliation faced by those who resisted. My audio recording of Gavin's Vegas proposition was described in detail. His dismissive tone, his manipulative words. Patricia's log was cited as evidence of a long-standing problem. Sarah Williams's journal entries painted a vivid picture of the toxic environment. The public outcry was immediate and immense. Social media erupted. #RedlineRot and #Fire Gavin Reed started trending in Seattle and then nationally. Former employees, both male and female, began sharing their own stories of Redline's toxic culture. Not all related to Gavin, but painting a broader picture of a company that valued profit over people. Redline's stock took a noticeable dip. Clients started calling concerned. Inside Redline, chaos reigned. I heard later through Patricia that emergency board meetings were convened. Gavin Reed, who had apparently dismissed the initial EEOC complaint as a nuisance, was reportedly in a state of panic. His carefully constructed world was crumbling. This is when Gavin made his desperate, pathetic move. An unknown number flashed on my phone. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Jenna, it's Gavin." His voice was strained, almost unrecognizable from the confident, charming predator I knew. "Jenna, we need to talk. This has all been a terrible misunderstanding." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. Margaret had prepped me for this possibility. "There's nothing to misunderstand, Gavin," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Please, Jenna," he pleaded. "Think of my family, my career. We had a good working relationship once, didn't we? I always thought highly of you. Maybe I was clumsy sometimes, but I never meant any harm. We can sort this out, just you and me. A personal settlement. Something to help you move on. Just tell the times you exaggerated or that you were emotional." The audacity, the sheer unadulterated narcissism was breathtaking. After everything, he still didn't get it. Or worse, he did, and he simply didn't care about the damage he'd caused, only about saving his own skin. "Gavin," I said, and the words came out with a power I didn't know I possessed. "You harassed me. You harassed Kelly Morrison. You harassed Sarah Williams. You harassed at least 6 other women that we know of. You abused your power. You retaliated against me when I refused to sleep with you. There is no misunderstanding. The only thing I want is for you and Redline to be held accountable. Do not contact me again. Any further communication will go through my lawyer." I hung up my hand, trembling not with fear, but with a potent surge of adrenaline and righteous anger. I had faced him not in a courtroom, but on my own terms, and I hadn't flinched. The public exposure was the ultimate confrontation. Our evidence wasn't just presented to a judge or an HR department, it was laid bare for the entire city, the entire industry to see. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Gavin, once the untouchable golden boy, was now radioactive. Redline Dynamics, once an impenetrable fortress, was scrambling. The next call came 2 days later. It was Margaret. "Jenna," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "The board of directors at Redline held an emergency session this morning. Gavin Reed has been terminated effective immediately. And that's not all." My heart leaped. "What else?" "They've agreed to nearly all our terms. They're establishing a $10 million compensation fund for victims of workplace harassment at Redline. An independent oversight committee will be appointed to review and reform their HR practices. They're issuing a public apology. Jenna, we did it." Tears streamed down my face. Tears of relief, of vindication, of sheer unadulterated triumph. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Kelly, Patricia, Sarah, and all the other women. It was about changing a corrupt system. "Thank you, Margaret," I choked out. "Thank you for believing in us." "No, Jenna," she said warmly. "Thank you for your courage. You stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. You gave others the strength to do the same. The immediate consequences were swift and decisive. Gavin Reed was gone. Redline was forced into a public reckoning. The shockwaves were palpable. The authority figures the Redline board had finally been forced to act not out of morality, perhaps, but out of self-preservation in the face of undeniable truth and overwhelming public pressure. The truth meticulously gathered and bravely presented had indeed set us free. My moment of triumph wasn't a shout from a rooftop, but a quiet, profound sense of justice, finally, blessedly served. The fight had been long and brutal, but in that moment, every second of it was worth it. The 48 hours following Margaret's call were a whirlwind. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from friends, former colleagues, the supportive ones, and even strangers who had read the Seattle Times article and its follow-ups. The news of Gavin's termination and Redline's settlement spread like wildfire. Redline Dynamics issued a carefully worded public apology acknowledging past failures and committing to fostering a safe and respectful workplace. And it was corporate speak, of course, but the actions behind it, Gavin's firing the $10 million fund, the independent oversight, spoke louder than any PR statement. By Gavin, I heard through the grapevine, was in full damage control mode, desperately trying to salvage his reputation. He apparently contacted former colleagues trying to spin his own narrative of being a victim of a witch hunt and misunderstandings. It didn't work. The evidence was too strong, the chorus of voices too loud. His attempts to minimize his actions only made him look more guilty and pathetic. My response, guided by Margaret, was gracious but firm. I issued a short statement through her office. I am grateful that Redline Dynamics is taking steps to address the systemic issues that allowed harassment to persist. My hope is that this outcome will empower others to speak out against injustice and encourage companies to create truly safe and equitable environments for all employees. This was never just about me. It was about ensuring accountability and fostering meaningful change. I declined interview requests, wanting the focus to remain on the systemic issues and the collective courage of the women who came forward. True to Margaret's prediction, more women, former Redline employees, began to quietly contact her firm. Some had experiences with Gavin, others with different managers, but all had felt silenced by Redline's culture. The $10 million fund, administered by an independent third party, became a beacon of hope for them, a tangible acknowledgement of their pain, and a path towards some form of restitution. The EEOC, whose investigation was now significantly bolstered, took an active role in overseeing the implementation of Redline's new HR policies. The Independent Oversight Committee, comprised of employment law experts and workplace safety advocates, began its deep dive into Redline's internal processes. New clear-cut reporting mechanisms were established, and mandatory comprehensive anti-harassment training, not the click-through-the-slides kind, was rolled out for all employees, starting with senior management. New boundaries were being drawn, not just on paper, but in practice. The public and community reaction was overwhelmingly supportive. Local news outlets ran follow-up pieces not just on Redline, but on the broader issue of workplace harassment in the tech industry. My story and Kelly's and Sarah's seemed to resonate deeply. We weren't just anonymous victims. We were women who had fought back and against the odds had won. Amidst the public fallout, there was one more piece of private justice I felt compelled to deliver. It was one of the hardest decisions, but I knew it was necessary. Gavin was married. His wife Cynthia was often mentioned as part of his charming family man persona. Did she know who she was married to? Did she deserve to be unknowingly tethered to a man capable of such profound deceit and abuse? I didn't think so. With a heavy heart but a clear conscience, I compiled a small, anonymized package. Not the salacious details, but undeniable proof of Gavin's duplicity. Key excerpts from Sarah Williams' journal detailing his after-hours meetings, a transcript of the Vegas proposition recording the audio itself, felt too invasive for this purpose, and a carefully worded, unsigned letter explaining the broader pattern of his behavior at work, emphasizing his manipulation and abuse of power. I included a list of publicly available news articles about the Redline case. I sent it anonymously to Cynthia Reed. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was about giving her the truth, the agency to make her own informed decisions about her life. She deserved to know the man she shared her life with was not who he pretended to be. The consequences of Gavin's actions needed to reverberate through all facets of the life he had built on lies. My support system, Lauren, Patricia, Kelly, my family and close friends, rallied around me. They celebrated the victory, but also understood the emotional toll the fight had taken. There was a sense of shared triumph of collective power. My newfound confidence wasn't loud or boastful. It was a quiet, steady strength that came from knowing I had faced my Goliath and hadn't backed down. The legal battle was largely over, but the work of healing and helping others heal was just beginning. The media attention eventually faded, as it always does, but the impact of what we'd achieved felt permanent. We had taken on a powerful man and a powerful company, and we had forced them to confront the truth. Justice in its many forms was beginning to unfold. A year passed. Life as it has a way of doing moved on, but it was a different kind of life now, one forged in fire, stronger and more authentic. The shadows of Redline Dynamics and Gavin Reed no longer loomed over me. Instead, I felt a profound sense of peace and empowerment. I landed a new job at Brightcrest Analytics, a rising competitor to Redline. It was a better-paying position with excellent benefits and, most importantly, a healthy work environment. The CEO, a dynamic woman named Eleanor Vance, had actually read the articles about the Redline case and had specifically reached out to a recruiter to find me. "We need people with your integrity and courage, Jenna," she'd said in my final interview. "And your project coordination skills are top-notch, too." At Brightcrest, my ideas were valued, my professionalism respected, and there wasn't a hint of the toxic undercurrents that had defined my time at Redline. I was thriving. The settlement money from the Redline Fund had provided a comfortable financial cushion, removing the stress of my sudden unemployment and allowing me to be selective in my job search. It wasn't about the money itself, but the security it represented, the freedom to rebuild on my own terms. And what if Gavin Reed karma, as they say, has a long memory and a precise aim? His termination from Redline was just the beginning. The public humiliation was intense. His name was mud in Seattle's tech scene. No reputable company would touch him. His wife Cynthia, armed with the information I had provided and corroborated by the public scandal, filed for divorce. Margaret had discreetly connected Cynthia with a fierce divorce attorney. The evidence of his character and deceit was irrefutable. Cynthia got the house full custody of their teenage daughter and a significant portion of his retirement fund. I heard a small, sad detail through the grapevine during the divorce proceedings. Gavin's daughter, who had once idolized him, learned the full extent of his actions, likely a combination of what her mother told her and her own online sleuthing of the news. She reportedly refused to see him for months and expressed profound disappointment, distancing herself from the father she thought she knew. That perhaps, more than any financial or professional loss, was a deeply personal consequence. Gavin eventually moved to Phoenix, taking a non-managerial, significantly lower-paying job at a small construction company. The owner, a gruff, no-nonsense older man, was apparently made aware of Gavin's past by a mutual acquaintance and hired him on the strict condition that he would have 0 female subordinates and a zero-tolerance policy for any misconduct. He was a shadow of his former self, his charm gone, his power extinguished. Redline Dynamics, under the watchful eye of the Independent Committee and the EEOC, underwent significant changes. Patricia told me during one of our regular coffee catch-ups that the atmosphere was slowly improving. "It's not perfect," she'd said, "but it's different. People are less afraid. HR actually listens now. Your fight, Jenna, it cracked the foundations of the old boys club." Many of the other women who had come forward received compensation from the fund, providing them with a sense of closure and validation. Some used the money to start new careers, others to get therapy and heal from the trauma. The systemic changes at Redline, though born from crisis, were real. New leadership was brought into HR. The board composition even shifted to include more women and independent directors. Other companies in Seattle, witnessing the Redline fallout, quietly began reviewing their own harassment policies and training programs. The ripple effect was undeniable. My personal growth was immense. The shy, conflict-avoidant woman who had once tried to hint at HR about problems was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who wasn't afraid to use her voice, and who understood the power of collective action. I found myself informally mentoring younger women at Brightcrest, encouraging them to speak up and know their rights. I wasn't an official advocate, but I shared my story when appropriate, hoping to inspire others. A few months ago, I was at a coffee shop downtown when I ran into a former colleague from Redline, someone who had always been pleasant but had remained on the sidelines during the whole ordeal. He looked at me with a newfound respect. "Jenna," he said, approaching my table hesitantly. I just wanted to say what you did. It was incredibly brave. Things are better at Redline now. Still a ways to go, but there's a shift. Thank you." That small acknowledgement from someone still within those walls meant a lot. It was a quiet confirmation that the fight had not only brought justice for the past, but had also planted seeds for a better future. I was vindicated, yes, but more than that, I was whole. I had faced the darkness and emerged not unscathed, but stronger, more resilient, and fiercely committed to the light. The full circle moment wasn't just about seeing Gavin get his due. It was about me, Jenna, reclaiming my narrative, my career, and my peace on my own damn terms. My story is a testament to the fact that one voice joined by others can indeed move mountains. Even mountains made of corporate power and systemic deceit. The moral: never underestimate your own strength and never, ever let anyone silence your truth. It's terrifying to stand up, especially when you feel alone, but the alternative, allowing injustice to fester, is far more corrosive. Have you ever felt dismissed, disbelieved, or retaliated against when you tried to speak up about something wrong? I want to hear from you. Comment your hometown and share a small piece of your experience if you feel comfortable. Let's show each other we're not alone. If this story resonated with you, please like it. If you believe in the power of fighting for what's right, share this story to inspire others who might be in a dark place right now. Subscribe for more stories of justice served and resilience rewarded. Tag someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, that their experience is valid, and that hope and help exist. Remember, seeking justice is not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power, your dignity, and ensuring that those who abuse their positions are held accountable. You are not defined by what happened to you, but by how you rise from it. Build your support system. Gather your facts and know that there are people who will believe you and fight alongside you. Together, we can create workplaces and communities where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. Your story matters. Your fight matters.